that this has been quite a week for me. I was sharing with one of the board members that the winter time is the most intense time of our spiritual ways, our life ways, and we initiated a young girl into the life of this, what we call the Sion, and it's referred to, loosely translated as the cry of the Spirit. We brought her into the life, and we're bringing back the old ways. We have a society of red paint and black paint, and just so happens that I come from the red paint, and the one that was coming into our society was also a red paint. So they selected 8 ladies and 4 men to bring her into the society, and so we worked with her for 6 days, and the first 3 days were very, very, very difficult, and by the time the 5th and 6th day came along, she became so strong that she went out into the public and danced for the first time. And it was very impressive to see her, such a young lady, be able to do that. It takes a lot of courage to enter into this life. And it also takes a really strong will, a belief in the Creator, and also in your spirit. The only way the elders would explain it to me is that for the time that we're born, there's ancestors all around us, and they're watching us, and one of them is going to select you eventually. And when they do, they'll be speaking to you, and they'll be taking care of you, they'll be protecting you, and then eventually you're going to come to the conclusion that you want to accept it into your life fully. And when that happens, rather than it being on the outside, it comes inside you, and you walk for the rest of your life in that relationship. And that's what we did to this young lady. She happened to be my niece as well. It takes us years to develop that relationship. If you have the gift of healing back home in our society, it'll take several years. And what happens is the Spirit, what they tell us to be prepared for is it'll take over your entire house. That your house will be yours no longer. You'll clean the house and make sure everything's in order and things for the Spirit, because you don't want to ever disrespect the ancestors in that way. And so your whole life changes, it just turns, and it's really a beautiful experience. And it'll send you messages before you accept it, and it'll take you on journeys, take you out to show you what's out there in the world, and in the spirit world especially. And one of my elders, she's been a healer for 50 plus years now. She's been my teacher, my mentor for 24 years now. And she said, when you begin to travel out there, don't worry about it, about getting lost out there. Don't worry about that. And she's such a beautiful lady. She must think that the best way to explain it to me is as a child. And so she says, we're sitting in her living room, and she says this. She says, if you imagine when you're just a child, and there's a bunch of bubble gum over there, and you start chewing it, and you grab another one and another one. Next thing you know, your mouth's really full. You can't hardly chew anymore. He says, what would happen if you took that bubble gum and you pull it out and stretch it out as far as your arm would reach, and then you let go of it? And I smiled, and I said, oh, it would come back. I said, that's what your spirit does with you. It'll always come back to where it started from. And so they teach us in those simple ways. They say, because we're out there traveling, some of us, I should say, and you really can't prepare yourself for what's out there outside of the prayers that you have in your heart and in your mind, and the belief that the good would always be stronger than the negative energy around you. No matter what they throw at you, you just know that God is good, and He's kind and generous, and He'll make sure that you're standing up at the end of that altercation or whatever it might be. And that doesn't make it easier, though. It's kind of like they introduce you to things that you'd never imagined. The ancestors, and anyway, I don't know where all that came from. I just wanted to introduce myself. I wanted to sing the song. Anyway, I want to say this, and I would ask if, before I start singing, if you'd turn the camera off. This is a family song that's been handed down from my great-grandfather, and Charlie Edwards, and he was a master carver. I don't like using that word. That word kind of floated into our lives. He was a carver, a very good carver, and he was preparing to die, preparing to pass on, to move on to the other side, and he went out to all the elders and said goodbye to them in a formal manner, and spent the time in the village going around shaking hands and drinking tea and just enjoying the company. And then my great-grandmother, she said, where's Charlie at? Where's my mate at? And no one knew, and so they sent search parties out. We live on a little island, 10,000 acres, and so they had a little time trying to track him down. And then my great-grandmother, she said, oh, I know where he's at. And so they sent the group out to the old growth cedar that he dropped to carve the telegraph canoe. It was an 11-man racing canoe. It was really a treasure to him. All through his life, he just really enjoyed that part of his life of carving and bringing to life the spirit of the cedar in another form, in another way. And so the runners went out there to that location where the stump was, and there was my great-grandfather. And he was singing this song. The song was given to him from the cedar tree itself, from the cedar stump. It was singing to him, and he was singing it back, and he was walking around the stump and singing this song. And then before he passed away, he said that, you take this song and you use it for healing the people, of open up their hearts and minds to allow the sacred to enter into their lives. And so from those instructions, we've been carrying this song, and our village is, Sunami's tribe has 800 and probably just a little over 850 people. And about 300 of those are my first cousins. And so we get together and we sing this song. So I'm hoping that they're back behind me here to help me out to sing. Anyway, I wanted to also do a little correction. My name is Squai, from my mother's mother side of the family, and Sa'atil from my father's side. And the Squai came from the beginning of our time in the Coast Salish lands. There was no time when the Squai name did not exist in our lands up north of here. And the Sa'atil name came with an interesting story behind it. My grandfather was the last one to carry that, Thomas Williiams, and his father, my great-grandfather, came from Wales across the Atlantic, and then he promised his family over in Wales that he had hit the East Coast and he'd travel until he found a place that reminded him of home. And so he headed across the United States, looking and looking, not finding anything. And lo and behold, in order to get to our village, there was one bridge at that time that connected us to the mainland. And he got across that bridge and he looked and he says, oh, this is home right here. And then he found my great-grandmother, Mary Williiams, and the story began. He began his life with us, with our people. He was a Methodist minister and a logger, and he loved our people. And so I was over in Ireland. We were invited to a World Peace Conference. The north and south of Ireland were engaged in this dialogue, trying to figure out how do we become friends, how do we do this work. somebody had the great idea to invite indigenous people in from around the world to have this conversation with them. And so they called up, and two of my friends and I jumped on a plane and headed over. And they said, well, we're going to be only there, just for a short while. How about we take a couple extra weeks and actually have a vacation? And none of us are used to that vacation stuff. And so we said, well, okay, let's do that. And anyway, we went. They said, where do you want to go? And I said, I'd love to go to Wales. I'd like to go see my grandfather's territory. And I wasn't aware of how we were going to get there or anything, but there's a pretty fancy ferry boat that just down from where we were at the Guatemala Peace Institute where we were staying. It was like a mile away where the ferry landed, and it took us over across to Holyhead Point. And Holyhead Point was a little island that's connected to the mainland by a bridge. And so there's a little gas station there. We got off the ferry. We had our activist friends with us. They all went in to get water and that sort of stuff. And I said, oh my God, I finally made it. I'm going to go for a walk out into nature. And sure enough, there was the ferns, there was the berries, there was the pines were there, and it looked like I could have been back at home. The island there connected to the mainland. And it was a beautiful experience for me. Anyway, so 1/8 of my bloodline comes from Wales, and when I was a little fella, they'd always be playing cowboys and Indians and on the res and things, and for some reason, in those days it wasn't popular to be a Native American. It was popular to be a Coast Salish or any type of Native, I suppose. And but I didn't, for whatever reasons, I didn't want my buddies to know that I was part white. And so it took me until I was a sophomore in high school to really start figuring this out and just saying, well, that's who I am. That's my great-grandfather. He made a big statement to come to this land. And I need to honor that as I honor the Coast Salish ways as well. And so with that, I would like to offer this song. And I want to thank the brother who offered the prayer, the language. I really thank you so much. The honor song was beautiful. Thank you so much, Rod, Linda, and all the work that's going on here. I really appreciate it. I know Rod probably knows this one here. Rarely are you welcome in your own homeland when you start talking about the ways, and people will say, who do you think you are? And things. And the only thing that saves us is when the elders come and they stand next to us as we're speaking, and then the rest of they put their eyes down. The ones who are giving you a hard time, they'll put their eyes down and they'll say, oh my God, he's got the support of the elders, so we'll have to allow this to exist. And so that's kind of the way that I entered into this life. There's not too many people that are paying attention to the elders these days. And I noticed in the ceremonies that there was a handful of them that no one would go and visit with or talk to and things. And I watched and I realized that they were the ones that were the strictest with the teachings. They're the ones that handed down the pure knowledge. And for some reason that excited me. I went straight to those elders and I sat down with them. And so for about 24 years now, they've taken me under their wing and asked me to share a little bit of this knowledge. They knew I was traveling around the world, and they knew that I was meeting with the indigenous people wherever I went, and they also knew that we were working with the Jesuits and with other cultures and other communities. And so we had to have a sit down, and I asked them the question, what can we share and what is prohibited for us to share? And the elders from the north, from Vancouver Island, my relatives, there was 20 of them that caught the ferry and came over because it was an important question to kind of kick around and things. They came over to our village and we sat down, spread the table, we fed them and sang the songs and introduced the prayers just as it has happened here. And then we let it go. We said, this is what we're asking. What can we share in the public forum, and what do we leave back at home? And 2 days later, 2 days later, we realized that 90, and this is just round numbers, 90% of our Coast Salish life ways, of our worldview, is meant for the public. 90% of it. There's the initiation process when we bring to life the spirit within one of our members that we don't talk about. We can't talk about that. That's the most sacred thing that we can, that knowledge, we have to hang on to that. But almost everything else we can. And so I'm going to give it a shot. and if you get bored, I don't know if we have any coffee or anything like that. We better go make yourself at home. Come back and maybe I might have something interesting to say when you get back. Usually when we sing this song, depending on the occasion, the event that's going on, there will be images that will come to us, and we process them while we're doing our work, and it's really a beautiful way of life. When I was younger, my sister, she wanted, after my mother died in 72, and I was 19 years old, and my sister, older sister, she kind of took on that motherly responsibilities. At least I didn't ask her to, she just kind of did that. And she kept on talking to me about, you need to go to law school. And I said, I've only studied business administration. I took one law class and I wasn't too excited about it. And she said, no, you got to go. And she found these full scholarships, even room and board and all the rest of it, everything was taken care of. But she needed to take this entry level test, and it was down at the University of New Mexico, Indian Law Center down there. And just to appease her, I thought, okay, I'll take the test. And I didn't even try very hard. Not that I'm very smart at all, I just didn't have my heart into it. And come to find out, there was Washington State, they selected 2 in Washington State, and the 2 highest scores, and I would happen to be 3rd on that list. And so I said, oh, wow, that's pretty close. Anyway, the number 1, she couldn't go because she couldn't break ties with her work and with her family and things. And so they called me up and they said, if you'd like to, we have this scholarship for you to go down to New Mexico. And I was working as a biotech at that time, and I was having kind of fun doing that. But I knew I'd break my sister's heart if I didn't go and try it out. And so I said, okay, I'll go. What I realized, it was that my grandma, she heard that I was going down, so she said, go get Ray and have him come sit down with, I want to talk to him. Oh, I said, oh, okay, I'm in trouble now, I wonder what I did this time. She said this, she said, it's important for you to listen to what the elders have to say here in our Coast Salish land. It's important for you to sit with them. Not to ask any questions, just to sit and to serve them, to cut their wood and to go get their groceries, go get the elk out of the freezer or whatever it is. Just make sure that you're there with them, because they'll eventually adopt you and they'll talk to you about this life that we live. And she said, I've been watching you, and I noticed that the elders, they call me up and they tell me that you were there to visit them. And so she said this, she said, as I was getting ready to head off to this program, she said, I have a feeling you're going to be able to go any place you want to in this world. Not like I lived my entire life here in the Coast Salish lands. And so I want you to be reassured. I want you to know that as long as you know your Coast Salish life ways, as long as you know those in your heart and your mind, the doors of the world, of the indigenous people of the world, they'll be open to you. Because they'll see that you listen. They'll see that you understand how to carry yourself. You understand how to walk on the earth in a gentle manner. They'll see those things and they'll open the doors and say, please, come on in. We must talk. I want to talk to you about your ways. Who taught you these things? The things that you're speaking of now. All of my grandmother's children, her siblings, they all passed away really early in life. My mother was the oldest of the brothers and sisters, and she was 49 years old when she passed on. And I had a feeling that she stayed for the extra 25 or 30 years to be able to fill in that gap where our uncles and aunties and our moms weren't able to be there to talk to us, to share with us. Which is kind of nice, because I wasn't her favorite, but I was pretty close. I was pretty close. And my mom, she'd be really stern with me, and I thought I got the better end of the deal to have this teacher who's so kind. I'll tell you the story about this Kwai name that I carry. It's my grandmother's family name, and she was 99 at that time, and she had one last piece of work to do, and that was to pass names down to as many as she could identify in the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, the great-great-grandchildren. And she wanted to name us so that we'd see who our relations are and know how to carry ourselves. Because the name carries a value with it. The name is something that what they tell us is that you don't drag your name in the mud. You don't do that. And so when it came time for her to do this, I just happened to be on the road. I was a little bit busy those days, and I had a gathering up in the Rocky Mountains above Taos. It was 8,200 feet up in the Rockies. It's a wildlife refuge. It was off from the grid. It was pretty cool. I liked it. There was moose walking around. There was wild horses. I don't even like calling them wild horses. There were beautiful horses walking around, and it was like, wow, you step back in time. And the neat thing about it, your cell phone didn't work, or they didn't have any way to communicate with anyone else other than the people in the room. And it was really a unique experience. It was really something. It was after 9/11. They called together the major religions of the United States to have a conversation about how do we bring our people closer together so that there's less racism, less hatred, less violence in our communities. How do we do that? So they got this big idea of having this big gathering up in the mountains. Kind of like an afterthought, I had a feeling that they wanted to bring two indigenous voices into the circle. And they must have been pretty poor with knowing the Native people, because I ended up being one of them. There was an elder from the Navajo Nation that was there as well. And it was in October, I remember, because I went to the elders. I had just gone through the initiation the year before. They call it the paint up. After your first year, after your first winter of initiation, the first dance of the next winter is a dance that you put on. You spread the table, and your brothers and sisters that are with you, that go in that same year, we spread the table and we light the fires. We invite the community in so they could see that we didn't lose our song, that we didn't lose that identity. Anyway, we usually start that up in November, and so it was October when I was flying down to Taos, down to the mountains there. So I went to the elders and I asked them, I said, is there anything I should be doing? First of all, can I go? Can I go hang out with these crazy religious leaders? And they were a little bit kind of uneasy about that, but they thought that it'd be all right. And then they said, well, what are they going to do? I said, well, we're going to talk about the different values that we carry and how do we learn how to live together as one family. And they said, well, it's getting really close to your pain up. What you should do is when you're up there in the Rockies is you should fast for 4 days and you should bathe in the morning in the ice cold water in the streams that are running through there. And you shouldn't talk for the first 4 days. And I thought, gee, I'm going to have to tell these guys I can't say anything for the first 4 days. Out of 7 days, I'm going to have to talk to these guys. And do they really want me at this gathering? And they thought it was really something. They said, sure, yeah, come. We'll accommodate your spiritual needs. That's what it's all about. So I sat in the circles and I listened. And I excused myself from the breakfast, lunch, and dinner table and went for long walks. And I got up early in the morning as the sun was rising and bathed. On the third day of the fasting, an elder 7 years before, he prepared me for what was going to take place on that third day. The first time I was able to travel, to see the world through my spiritual eyes. 7 years before, we were down in Guatemala at an indigenous gathering. We brought one of our healers, one of my favorite teachers. We're not supposed to have favorites either, so I'm kind of breaking rules here. Can you scratch that part out there? Thank you. The late Kenny Moses Sr. was a teacher who was so sincere, so beautiful, so much knowledge. We're down in Guatemala at a meeting, and we were walking down the streets of this little village, about 10,000 people there, and indigenous people, and he stopped in his tracks, and I knew he was seeing something. I knew he was in communication, so I just stopped and waited, and he said this, he said, sometime down the road, this is what's going to happen, this is how it's going to unfold, and I want you to be particularly, pay attention to this and this and this. So he kind of laid it all out for me, and I thought, wow, this is really something here. And 4 years later, he passed away. We were over in Egypt at a UN conference over there, and we came back, and he wanted to go on one more trip after we got back, and he took his family to Hawaii, and he passed away there. And that was 4 years after he told me about this down in Guatemala. Oh, I guess it's that way, isn't it? It's down south there. Anyway, 4 years later, he passed away, and 3 years after that, what he had seen and how he wanted to share it with me, all those things came back. They came flooding back, and it was the first big one for me. It was the first one that basically went back into the past and explained something to our people here in Coast Salish lands, of how things were and why this had happened, why our people were, why the village was burned down. It showed me that, and so I came back home, and I didn't either. I left from the wildlife refuge, went down to Albuquerque, jumped on a plane over to Florida, and had a meeting. I was on the tribal council, and we had a council meeting over there, NCAI, And then as things worked out, I ended up having to go down to Miami from Fort Lauderdale for another conference. I was also on the National Network of Grants Makers. It was a body of 250 foundations that came together to distribute their money to people of color. And so I was with them the next time, and I kept on calling back home to the elders and saying, can you tell me anything else that I need to do? Can you tell me anything else? So finally, when I was ready to fly back home, the elder that adopted me, she said, I'll talk to your wife. And she said, but you need to go up to the mountains. From the airport, you go up to the mountains and pray. And you come down when you have an answer. And I said, oh my God, this is really something here. All I wanted to do really was to go home. All I wanted to do was just to go home. But it doesn't work out that way. When you enter into this life and you're responsible for the people, the message that you have, the message that you receive, if it can help the people, then you do everything you can to make sure they get the accurate message. So I was up in the mountains, and I just received a new job just before that as well. And I had to go down to talk to my boss. It was down in Seattle. I was heading up the Native American desk for the Seattle Archdiocese, and it was our first retreat that we were going to meet with the African American and the Asian and Pacific Islanders and what they refer to as Hispanics, but the indigenous from South. We all had desks around the Archbishop at that time. And I had to come back from all that activity, and in my first week of work, I had to go and tell my boss that Grandma called and that I should go home now. So you can see how this thing is getting a little more complicated as you move forward. So Jim Picton, my superior, he said, I brought him into the office and I pressed the button and went through the messages, and here it was my cousin, who's this person that speaks for my grandma. And my cousin said, Barb, she said, Grandma said it's time to come home now. And I brought Jim in there and we went through the messages, and I said, this is one you got to listen to. And he just smiled and he says, what do you think she means? And I said, I think she wants me to come home. So she's never asked me that before. She's never. And so, well, you better get going. I'll explain it to the others and take care of that work. And so I went back home, and Grandma was handing out our names to the different children, grandchildren, not children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and so on. And I got there on the last half of the second day, and I said, oh my God, there was 4 witnesses over there, and they were recording everything. She had her hospital bed, and all of us grandchildren, great-grandchildren, there's 3 rows of us on this side of her bed, and we were all kind of standing and listening to it and witnessing everything. She went through name after name after name to tell the history of it, of what it meant and who carried it before the person that was going to receive it, and what that relationship was, not only to the human, but to the world itself, to the ecology around us, to nature. And it's really a powerful, opened up a whole history book about our ways. And it went on for 3 days. I got there the last half of the second day, and I didn't want to be whatever. I didn't want to pray and say, please, Grandma, give me a name. I really want, before this is over, I'd like to receive a name. And we couldn't do that. And so I just sat silent. I stood in the back in the 3rd row. The last name after the 3rd day ended, she was really, really tired. And the last name she mentioned was, she says, Squai, my family name. She said, Ray, I want you to step forward. So the rows parted, and I went over there and knelt down next to her bed. And she said, you should carry this name. I was wise enough to, or fortunate enough, I should say, to be able to spend the last 25 years with my grandma, to listen to the words that she had to share with us. And I knew of her life. I knew of the respect that the people from the Longhouse Society and the Roman Catholic Church that they had for her. I knew that, and I said, gee, I wish I wouldn't have thought about getting a name now. I don't want to carry the responsibility that goes with this. I didn't say that to her, I just said it to myself. And she talked about the name, about what it meant for her to live in that way. And then she excused me, so I stood back up and I got back in the third row, and you could see she was really tired, so we look at the witnesses, and they pointed toward the door, so we all start filing out the door, and about maybe 12 of us got out the door, and the elders, the witnesses, they called us back in there. And we looked, and Grandma was talking in our language, in Lashutsi, there was no one we couldn't see who she was talking to. And so we just said, wow, this is going to be interesting. And so we stood and listened and watched, and we looked at the witnesses and to get some cues from them, and they were just really quiet. And she spoke for probably, I'll just say several minutes. And it looked like it was quite an entertaining conversation that she was carrying on. I just didn't understand the words. And then she stops and she says, Ray, please step forward. So they opened up, and I walked through there again and knelt down, and she said, your grandpa, he actually passed away the year before I was born. I was born in 1952, and in 51 he passed away. I said, your grandpa, he came here at the foot of the bed, and he wanted to share with me some of the things that I should share with you. And so I listened, and the witnesses were taking all this in. And then he said, you should carry my name as well, my grandpa, Sa'atio. The first time we heard it in this generation, first time, I looked over at my cousins back there, especially Barb, which is the one who knows the most about our genealogy. I looked back at her, and she basically implied that she didn't hear that one before either. So there was a debate, or I shouldn't call it that. There was a discussion. The four elders, the witnesses that were on the other side, they talked about it back and forth in our language. And we sat and we waited. We stood there and listened and waited. And I remember the very moment that these words came out. Of the four elders, the eldest stood up and she said this. She says, we know how difficult the life's going to be for you to carry those two names. So we're going to ask you to give one of those names to one of your cousins. To give one. You select the name to give to them. We want to protect you. And I didn't understand what that was all about. All I knew was that they were pretty serious about it. And I said, oh, gee, I better think about this. And I responded by saying, I know Grandma, the Squai name. I know of her life. I know of the way she conducted herself. I've read about my grandfather, Thomas, the one who carried the Sa'atio name. I read books about him and the life that he led. And I said, I don't have it in me to select one over the other. Somebody else is going to have to do it. And so the four witnesses, the four elders, they went back to work again. They started talking in the language. And then they said, well, we understand the position you're in. They said, what we want you to do is you keep an eye on the generation that's coming after you. And you select one or two of those young ones to share the name with you. But you can carry the name, but we want to advise you of this. The names are very few in our villages back at home. It's hard to bring them out. And there's like 4 or 5 cousins that will share the same name. And they see you and you're walking around with these two names. they're going to get jealous. They're going to throw things at you, spiritual things, even thoughts. They're going to throw these at you. Said, you're going to have a rough life. And that's what they said. And that's what they're trying to protect me from. And they were pretty accurate with that as well. People in the longhouse, they test you all the time. They hear what the names that you carry, so they want to see if you have that gift. And so, I shouldn't say that. They'll test you is all. They'll see how strong you are. And so the elders, they came and they heard about these names, so they came and they sat next to me day after day after day to prepare me to carry this work, this way of life. And they shared some things with me that have protected me in this life that I can't share with you because it's a sacred and a ceremonial way of doing this work. What I learned from all this was that the more tests you have in your life, the more tests that you run into in your life, the more the elders will come and sit with you and prepare you for the next one that's coming. Because the next one's always bigger than the one you thought, my God, that one just took my whole energy out of me. And, oh no, there's one bigger than that that's coming. He said, you sit down, I want to talk to you. Anyway, I find some humor in that, but I also know that we have to take this knowledge and what the elders had said, and this is really a brand new way of looking at this life as well. What the elders have said is that go out and share what you can outside of that 10% that you leave back in the longhouse. You share what you can, and if the people understand it or if they accept it, then that will be good. Because you're sharing your heart, you're sharing your life ways, you're sharing the way that you choose to walk on the earth. And the more people we can find that are willing to accept that responsibility to walk in that manner, the better off we're all going to be. That's part of the game plan anyway, so we'll see how it works. I want to say this, there's people that, they're younger than me in, we call belly button years when we were born into this world, but they're older than me by 10 and 20 years in the Sion life, in that sacred spiritual life. But they were brought up in the wrong way. They carry some anger into the world of spirit, and that's not good. It's not good at all. And so we're trying to figure out a way. I shouldn't even say we. The elders have advised me of a way that we're going to do this work. Again, there's 150 miles up into Canada. There's over 100 longhouses up in Canada. That's the strongest part of our Sion, our Longhouse Society. And in Washington State, we have it all over the Puget Sound area. All the tribes there, well, I should say, probably, there's more and more, probably half of the tribes in the Puget Sound area and the Salish and Sea area are from the Sion Society. What they decided to do, and they came down to talk about that, they decide these things through visions, through dreams. They come to them and they call the people and they sit down, they talk it over and say, can we do this? Is this the right time for this to happen? It just so happens that one of my uncles is a strong elder up in Canada, Vancouver Island, and he's been a part of those conversations on the island. And about 2 years ago, it's 4 years ago, they said that what we should do is build these red paint houses specifically for the red paints to dance, and no other work will take place. They will put the 3 homes, the home sites that we'll select, one on Vancouver Island, one in the Fraser Valley, and one in the States. And they didn't know where that was going to be, but the next year came, and they were still organizing around that thought. And the elder, he had a dream, had a vision, and said, "Who is this Kwai? Who is this one?" Said his name came to me in this dream. He's the one that's going to build the red paint house for the stateside. And my uncle, Norman Underwood, he said, "Oh, that's my nephew." So he lives in Swinomish. Tell me about him. So Norman talked about what's been going on in my life for the last several years. And they said, "Go and tell him that he's going to build the red paint house." And those tests that I talked about earlier, and that's another test that they have. Because I'm a young in the society. I'm only 11 years old, but you can't question or challenge the visions and dreams that come. You don't ever do that. You don't ever say no to something like that. And so we'll dance in it for the first time toward the end of this next month, toward the end of March. For the first time, we'll dance in that red paint house. We'll bring the red paint, the healers and the visionaries and the orators and those who work with the medicine plants. We'll bring them together and we'll sing our songs for one reason. And what they told us is that we're going to put an umbrella over the 120 plus longhouses throughout the Coast Salish lands. That the 3 of us will sing our songs in those 3 locations and put this beautiful umbrella over so that the rest of the longhouses can take the time to really just breathe in the sacredness of this. I studied Indian law and I studied business administration. I worked for the State Department of Health in the state of Washington, and I worked for the Archbishop or his office there in the Catholic Church, and I taught in the junior college or community colleges. But this work here, I can't think of nothing else that I'd rather do, nothing else. We know that that there's this sort of disease that's come into our society, our Sion, in the form of arrogance, in the form of ego, in the form of authority or power over another being. That's not right. It's not right. It's not acceptable in any house, in any home, in any family. It's not right. So they convinced us to take our best steps forward into the future, and to do this out of the love and the generosity and the kindness of our hearts, of our collective hearts. Of the red paint. I've watched movies and I wonder about the imagination of those folks that write those things out. Sometimes it's sci-fi and these other things. But I got to tell you that to live out this life in its fullest. And no one would ever imagine what's coming toward you in the next day, and the next month, and next year. All you know is that it's going to be a beautiful life. It's going to be a life well lived. Because we've seen our grandmothers, our grandfathers walk in this way. Our uncles and aunties. People think that the heart of who we are as cultural people is a song and dance, or is a storyline. Really, it's the spirit, the relationship to the ancestors, the relationship to the creator of all. That's what this life is all about. The other stuff is once we're able to see that, you know that whatever you do in this life, will be done out of gratitude. I was first getting introduced to this world, to this way of looking at life, and this elder, she called me up, and I actually sent her son over to the house and said, Jim said, Mom wants to talk to you. And I usually when they come with that sort of message, say, well, let's see, I have a meeting at, and maybe tomorrow would be better for me, or something like that. You just drop whatever you're doing, you go over there, because that's really the most essential part of our life, is to be welcomed in by the elders. And so she started telling these stories. This was 25 years ago. Telling these stories, and she looked on her wall and seen the pictures, and she told about those stories that went with those pictures. And she went way back into our life, our spiritual life. And then she stopped. Her husband was sitting right with her, Gordon. And she said, I don't know why I'm telling you this. I don't know. This is an hour and a half later. I don't know why I'm sharing this with you. You're going to need it in the future. That's all I can think about now. You're going to need it in the future. She knew that she wasn't going to be there to walk with me. When these problems came toward us, when problems came toward our family or our village. So she shared them at that time. This went on year after year after year, and it's probably about 15 years into it. And I was up in Canada. The elders called me up there, and they wanted to share with me some teachings on how to conduct some work. And I came back home, and I said, I feel overwhelmed about this knowledge that they're sharing. I don't want to carry it. And I don't want to have to be responsible for it. So my favorite cousin, her and I are 29 days apart. Her father died, my uncle died when both of us were like 8 years old. And so they moved in with our family, and we became like brother and sister. And it's been that way. Anyway, when she was young, she was shipped off to a boarding school in Oklahoma. And she got really sad inside. Her heart was broken. She missed her mom and missed her dad, missed the reservation, the village. And they brought her back home, and they brought the spirit, the Sion out of her. And so at 15 years old, until we're both 60 now. 45 years of her life she walked in this way. I'm 11 years old, so I'm just a little puppy compared to my cousin. And so I got back home and I said, Barb, I want to take you out to lunch. I need to ask you a question. And so we went out to lunch, out to this nice little private place out in the country, and I shared with her what the elders had shared up in Canada, and I said, I'm afraid to carry this knowledge. I'm afraid to carry these words. I don't want to let them down, and I don't want to go back when they call me. That's what I was telling her. And she said, she looks at me, and this is like somebody who grew up. She's an old timer now. She's beautiful. Her knowledge is beautiful. She said, when those elders invite you into their home or into their community hall and they talk to you in this manner, so they're not talking to you. They're not talking to you. They're talking to that paint that you wear, that red paint that you wear. They're talking to that. It's up to you. Your responsibility is to come back home and to share it with the rest of the red paints so we can all carry it together. It seems so simple. I was able to sleep that night anyway, so I felt better about that. So now, this red paint house that we're building, we'll be able to share this knowledge. Sit in a circle and sing our songs and share some bread, and share some soup, and talk about this ancient wisdom. I shouldn't even call it that. That's not right. There's no time. There's no measurement of time when we're talking about the Spirit. It's present with us all the time. And we go into what people refer to as the past, or we go to what people refer to as the future. But no, it's right here. It's all around us. It's here. It's right here and right now. We just have to have the ability to do that. So this awkward English language that we use, it's a little bit crazy. They tell us that in our language, in Lashutsi, that there are no adjectives. There are no adjectives. There's not the brightest or the newest or the fastest or the strongest, none of that stuff. It is what it is. It's God's creation and it's beautiful, the way it is. The most sacred things in our life are the most ordinary things. They become the medicines for our people. The rest of this consumer society, they discard those. They say, that's garbage. And boy, oh boy. They share with us that when you're able to see the sacredness in the most ordinary things, that's when you're ready to go. That's when you're ready to move on with your life. That's when you'll be accepted in the indigenous homes around the world, when you're able to understand that simple understanding. There's this Western constructs of thought that we've really been grappling with for the last 20 years throughout the Western Hemisphere. And what we realize is that if we just turn it around, what the elders tell us is when you're walking in this assimilated manner, what you have to do is turn your mind around, because that's where the truth is. That's where the truth is. The best way to approach the ancestors, the best way to approach this spirit that's waiting to ignite inside you, is to learn learn how to slow your heart down, learn how to slow your mind down, to become one with all that is around you. Become one with it. The organization, nonprofit organization that we created, it's called One with Creation. That came to me in a dream. So I went to the elders and I asked them, what does this mean anyway? And they sent me up to Lummi, and then to Nooksack, and then to Upper Skagit to meet with the elders, the healers, those tribes, and then to come back home. So it took me 2 days to get through to visit with the elders, and they opened up their doors, and they had their children or grandchildren put the soup on, and to get some tea out, and they knew I was going to be there for a while. So we sat and visited and talked. And you came here for some reason. What would that be? And I said, didn't Maxine call ahead to let you know? And, no, I just knew you were coming. Oh, okay. So I said, I had this dream, and in this dream, these words are the only ones that I remembered. And I said, one with creation. What does that mean? What's it represent? So for 2 days, beautiful days of being with the elders in their homes, they tell story after story after story, beautiful stories. Didn't know how they all connected. I didn't know have a clue of that. But I knew that eventually I'd figure this out. Got back home, went over to the elder where I started with Maxine, and she said, so tell me, what did they say? And I said, well, they told me these really beautiful stories that I'll never, ever forget. But not one of them ever addressed the one with creation question that I came up to ask, and not one of them. So she said this, she says, so you see that picture up there on the wall? Have you seen it before? Because I've been to her house for many years by that time, and no, I said, no, I haven't seen it, didn't notice that one. There were 3 elders in the picture, and there was a dirt floor, and there was a young man, probably about 10 years old, maybe 12, that was sitting down close to the fire. He was taking care of the fire for the 3 elders. And the 3 elders were healers from our community. They took care of that work in our community, and so she named them off. And the 3rd one that was in there was my great-grandfather. And so I said, oh boy, I better listen really closely now. And so she said this, she said, there's 3 men, they were laughing, they were joking, they grew up together. And the young man, the one that was 10, 12 years old, happened to be Maxine, the elder that I was sitting with, happened to be her father. And so that's how far back the picture went. And anyway, the 3 men were sitting there joking and laughing and things, and said, hey, do you have that authority, that power that you started out in your life with? And the first one, he laughs and just kind of teasing each other. And he stood up and he offered this prayer. And he made a gesture toward the fire, and he changed the elements down there. And the guys, they looked at each other and said, oh, wow, you do still have that. He sat down, and so the next elder, they looked at him and said, do you have what you started out this gift with? Do you still have that authority? So they joked a little bit more, and he stood up and he sang a song and offered these words, and he made a gesture toward the fire, and the elements changed. And they said, oh, wow, you have it too, exactly the same thing. You never lost 1 ounce of that gift that you have. 3rd one happened to my great-grandfather, and of course he was ready for them, so they teased him and things, and he stood up and he sang a song and he offered a prayer, and he did his work, and what he did was he turned all the elements back to the way they started out with. He put it all back in order. So the interesting thing about this is that each one of these men, as they finished their work, in our language, they said, one with creation, one with creation. She said, I haven't heard those words till you walked in my door. And so you had to go talk to the elders so they would know that the waves are coming back to us. Even the young ones are starting to receive these messages. It was an invitation to go out to meet with the elders on their terms. When you have those dreams or those visions, or the way we explain it is these things that are coming toward you. When you receive these things and you share them with the elders, it opens up this magnificent world. They wait for you to ask the right question, and then they'll teach you what's the next thing on the list. So this has been going on for these years now. All right. Is it like 8:30 or something? Okay. A little after that? Okay. I'm glad he's here. Thank you, Larry. It reminds me of a movie that I watched one time when I think it was Einstein and a couple of those guys that kind of know that world. They were talking about time and the relevance of time, and what they realized was there was no justification for the time that we use. And so I think I kind of think along those lines as well. I just lose track of everything. I guess it's time to, what Larry says, wind it up, or at least conclude my work, and then to open up for questions. Yeah. I hope I notice there's only 2 people snoring back there, and if you can wake them up and let them know we're getting close to the end. I'll leave you with this then. This is came to me in a dream as well. Father Pat Toohey, a really good friend, Jesuit friend, he came to us when we had very little, and he stayed with us, and he did what he could to help us bring our language back, to help us bring our love for the Spirit, for the sacred back, in the way that he could as a Irish Jesuit priest, and which was really limited, but he tried. He and I have been friends for 25 years now, and he told me about 20 years ago, he said, these dreams that you're having, these things that are coming toward you, you should write them down in a book when you receive them at the nighttime and things. And so this is the first thing that I wrote down. I haven't written anything down since then. This is the only piece that I wrote down in that, because the elder said, "Oh, Father Pat doesn't know what he's talking about. Just hang on to those. You'll be all right." They were just joking with him. But this is what came to me that night. When the teachings of old become the wisdom of new, when greed, hatred, and selfishness are but of days gone by, our understanding of life, of love, of beauty shall be strengthened with every step. For it's within these steps that our Creator shall appear. He shall show us the path to lasting peace. The peace lies within. All of the work that the elders point to as they're instructing us at whatever age we enter into this life, they're all pointing toward the intuitive. They're all pointing toward the inside, that we need to let go of the pain, and we need to let go of the jealousy, and we need to let go of these things that are obstacles to the really beauty that we can live out in our lives. The hatred and the anger, the resentment, the ego, all of those ambition, all that stuff is nonsense. It's crazy. You don't want to go there. To find some peace within your own heart, within your own mind, the world will open up. What the religious community calls mystery is really no mystery. All we have to do is to calm ourselves down, to find that peaceful place, and and the beauty will come to us. They tell us that we have to sacrifice in order to live this life, but that's a bunch of whatever. It's like what they give to us when we let go of those things, those physical things around us, when we let go of them, when we say, no, I really don't need that anymore. Something more beautiful and powerful, something so simple comes to us and it changes our whole world, our whole life. I just wanted to leave that with you, and I guess we have some time for some questions, and if you'd like to, please come up and maybe you can hold this feather and ask it so all of us can hear it. Thank you once again. Not all at once. Take your time. Take your time.
Wow. I wasn't ready for that. It came to me while you were talking here that it might be good to introduce these people to.
Oh, that's a good idea. Maybe their life stories as well.
These people here at the Spirit Council, some of them come over and over again to hear different elders, and some come for the first time to hear you.
Mm-hmm.
We're all seekers. We're all trying to make the world a better place. We're all maybe a little familiar with following our heart.
Mm-hmm.
I need to know a lot of practical ways of doing that, and walking this road with with things like making a living and young people that are growing up with television and all that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you come as one of our teachers,
Mm-hmm.
and we're eventually going to end up having to hold some of that elder role ourselves. And it's not like any one teacher is the elder. It's like we have many elders. And I just say that kind of in the tradition of saying, it's good to know who you're talking to, because we care. We care.
Thank you. Thank you so much. John, I want to thank you for your words. There are many, many obstacles that are out there for us who are referred to as adults, and the children and so on down. There are obstacles. They're tests for us. I'll share this story, and I want to kind of relate to your words. A good friend from Vancouver Island, a teacher. I just came back in from someplace down in South America, and he's always tracking me, trying to keep track of where I'm at and that sort of stuff. And he called up and he said, I wanted to share this story with you. And so I listened, and he said that they selected 7 elders from Vancouver Island, the many villages out there, to go to this Canadian government-sponsored conference that was addressing suicide in Canada, of the young especially. And so he said, for 4 days, they were listening to all the different departments justice, social services, psychology, psychiatry. It went on and on. He said it was really beautiful to listen to the words of how committed they were to this question about youth suicide. And then they invited the elders up to the stage, and the elders sat in a circle, and they talked amongst each other up there on the stage, and then they selected Norman to speak for them. And Norman said, he got up and he said this, he said, I want to thank you for inviting us. The hotel that we're staying in right now, it's really comfortable. Thank you so much. And the food is really good. It's nice. Thank you so much. He said, the question that you're asking, I want to share this with you, with these elders we're talking about. He said, we'll use one of our villages on the island as an example. When we see a young one, and we see him distancing himself from the people, see that he has a sadness in his heart. He's being troubled with something. Is what we do is we identify that youth, that young one. We spread the table for the community, and we invite the young one in, and we tell him how important he is to the rest of our community. We wrap a blanket of love around him and let him know how important he is to the future of this village here. We want to thank you for your invitation. I want to thank you. To me, that's what this is really all about. That if we approach the youth, an elder from Oahu, I went to him and I asked him this question. I said, what is the difference between the way that you do your healing work and the way that the Western medicine, which is right next door, that the Native Hawaiians both have an option to go to either one of those. What's the difference between yours and this way of looking at it? And his his mother, who was his teacher, was in a wheelchair right next to him. And he turns and looks at her, and she nods her head. And so he was able to share this. He said, the main difference is what my teacher here had shared with me. She said, when that individual walks in the door, it's an honor. It's an honor for me to be able to work, that he would want to place his or her life, spiritual life in my hands. And what we see is a spiritual entity coming toward us and in need of help. And it's just an honor and a privilege to be able to help him in any way that we can. I would say that's probably the biggest difference. It's about love. It's about identifying the sacred in all things. It's about owning that sacredness, walking in that way. The children pick it up a lot faster than we do, actually, if we give them a chance. If there's any other questions, I know that I probably bored the heck out of all of you. Just anxious to go home now.
Great.